This is Paul Ellis, Managing Director of Ellis Wealth Management, where we encourage you to invest in what you love. Ellis Wealth Management is an independent financial services firm focused on planning, advice, coaching, and investment management. We are dedicated to the families we serve, and we encourage you to invest in what you love.
From Bellingham to Vancouver, Tina Over is Washington's West Coast realty specialist. When it comes to selling your old home, purchasing your forever home, or making sound investment property decisions, call 425-343-2410 to put Tina's extensive regional knowledge and top-notch team to work for you and your family.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Lynnwood Times candidate interview with Mukilteo Mayoral candidates Jennifer Gregerson and Joe Marin. I am your host, Lynnwood Times reporter Bo Brusco, and I'm joined by Lynnwood Times publisher Mario Lotmore. So the way this is going to go is we're going to start first with a quick little bio of both the candidates. So Jennifer Gregerson is the first woman elected to serve as mayor of Mukilteo in 2013, after serving on the city council since 2004. As mayor, she has prioritized issues including public safety, walkable neighborhoods, and a healthy economy. Jennifer spearheaded the first new sidewalks and bike lanes in decades. She's also fought to support victims of domestic violence, funding the first domestic violence victims coordinator, a program that has now been expanded to support all victims of crime. Jennifer values the voices of her community. She led the effort to form a climate action committee, transportation task force, and the first Rose Hill Community Board and the DEI Commission. Jennifer earned a bachelor's degree from New York University and a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Washington. She now lives in Mukilteo near her childhood home. Joe Marin, a 58-year-old family man. Joe has been married to Candy for 36 years and has 2 grown daughters, 3 grandsons, and a granddaughter due in October. A 26-year-old Mukilteo resident, a 26-year Mukilteo resident, Joe is caring and approachable and listens to varied ideas and interests. His engaging and optimistic nature brings others together to create comprehensive solutions. Joe is a get-it-done person with experience as an entrepreneur and public official. Joe has been an insurance agent specializing in Medicare for 30 years. He is a former and current city council member and former mayor of Mukilteo. Joe also is involved through community service. Community service includes Campfire Snohomish County Board, South Everett Mukilteo Rotary, Maris Place for the Arts Board President, and former Mukilteo YMCA Board. Excellent. So we'll start this first question. We'll go to Jennifer first and then to Joe. The mayor is the chief administrative officer for the city, in charge of staffing, responsible for its daily operations, and implements legislation passed by the council. What will your top 3 priorities be if elected?
Yeah. Thanks so much for the question and for the opportunity to be here. My priorities are continuing to make sure we have good, safe places to walk and bike in our city. We've done a lot of work on that. I'll probably get to that at some point during our chat today. Looking to the future with vision and purpose. So we've got a lot of master plans that we're implementing, and so continuing on that track. I think being strategic and thoughtful about the future is important. And then the biggest one to me is recovery from the pandemic. The city finances weren't hit as hard by the pandemic, but our community certainly was. Businesses, families, households. So working on recovery. And once again, of course, being strategic and smart so that when we look at in the future, when we look back, we know we made smart decisions that change things for the long term.
Excellent. Thank you. And Joe, same question to you. If elected, what will your top 3 priorities be?
Well, it's a great question, and one of the reasons that I decided to get back into the Mukilteo politics and run for mayor was basically about that, the administrative officer of the city and being in charge of the staffing. And what I see happening at City Hall was concerning, which is one of the reasons I ran for mayor. There is no director there left since I was mayor. We're on our 5th finance director, we're on our 4th city administrator, and we're on our 3rd pretty much every other director, and I could list those all off. The other concern is that during Gregerson's time as mayor, She ended up putting $260,000 out in severance pay. The entire time that I was mayor in 8 years, we didn't put out any, and there was very little staff turnover. And so that was concerning to me, and one of the reasons that I decided to get back into the mayor's office. The other thing is that we are the only city in Snohomish County, including Darrington and cities like that doesn't have a parking ride lot. I'm back on the Community Transit Board. I'm pushing hard to make sure that that happens. It should be put in. We did all the groundwork before. We were waiting for the economy to turn back again. And unfortunately, when the community transit came to the city, they were turned down. And it would be over by the Bernie Weber Drive. For about 200 to 300 vehicles, but that's something that Mukilteo needs to do. I'd also focus on public safety. We hear lately a whole lot of car break-ins, and we're starting to see a bit more of homeless in Mukilteo, as well as we're not really doing a good job in terms of our traffic safety. And there's all the citizens I talk to, that's one of their major concerns, is the fact that the speeding that's going on in the community, and there'd be more of a focus on traffic safety as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. And Jennifer, since he did mention you by name in those opening comments, did you want to take a moment to respond to anything?
First thing, just to correct the record, actually during Joe's term, the city did pay out about $150,000 in pay to employees when they departed at the director level. So just so that's clear, and since he said it was zero. And then, my response on the question of management and our city team, I'm really proud of the team that we have at the city today. And there were folks that served the city for a decade or more. And during my time, they either came up for retirement, they found, they've been here for 10 years or so and found a new opportunity and closer to home in some cases. So a lot of that, there's just a lot of factors that came into it. And then at the end of the day, I would say I made some tough choices that are best for the organization. So I stand by them.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Joe, so this next question is going to be for you, and then we'll pass it off to Jennifer. This one's pretty plain cut, straightforward. How do you plan to promote Mukilteo and its local businesses?
Well, I would say the same way that I did before. My administration ended up having the city ranked twice by Money Magazine as one of the top 10 cities to live in America, because we went out there and we promoted ourselves. Working with Snohomish County and the Tourism Board, I think that Mukilteo has a lot to offer, and you'll notice that certainly with the waterfront and the lighthouse. But what we want people to do is not just spend maybe an afternoon, but come and stay in our hotels and spend time there. And the bigger thing that we can look at is all of the commuters going to Whidbey Island, and how do we get them to stop and frequent our businesses here rather than just going to businesses on the island. And whether that's advertising specifically on the ferries, working with the Chamber and Snohomish County Tourism again to do some of that. But there are certainly ways to be able to promote Mukilteo. I've done that in the past, and I would continue that into the future.
Well, just a follow-up question for you. What do you feel are some top concerns facing small business owners in Mukilteo, and what do you propose to address those concerns?
In talking to the small businesses, for the most part, what government needs to do more than anything is just get out of their way. We end up putting a good example is Ivers trying to put the seating in the parklet. That should have been something that was very easy to do, and yet the roadblocks were put in the way for them. The fact that it was the government that shut down businesses, I know it was due to a pandemic, but again, that was something that the government did that harmed them. So most business owners I talk to say we don't need something from the government. What we need more than anything is for them to just get out of our way. Streamline permits if we need them. Don't overtax us, and don't try to control our businesses.
Excellent. And then Jennifer's same first question to you there. How do you plan to promote Mukilteo and its local businesses?
I think that having a cohesive identity is a good way to do that. So if you look around Mukilteo right now, there's the Green Park signs that were put up in the mid-2000s. There's the Welcome to Mukilteo sign that I think is 20 plus years old. And then there's some signage at City Hall. And so having a cohesive look, and probably through an economic development master plan or something that tackles that as a whole issue, I think it's a good place to start. We're already doing some great work with our partnership with the Chamber, our lodging tax funds. We just asked the council and they approved reauthorizing a little bit more so we can make sure to fund the right projects in the coming years and not have to make big cuts there. And then we've got a great opportunity with the American Rescue Plan funding. So being strategic about those dollars, perhaps once we've got that kind of master plan concept, we can fund the implementation with that money. To have, what you see at the county level, their Seattle North Country brand, and we're featured in all of those places as tourists come to our community. But we don't necessarily have, like, the county developed that brand, but there isn't necessarily one that's for Mukilteo, and that's been the case for a long time. And so I think that's one good way to approach that issue, and then it's kind of how I look at a lot of things. So kind of plan first and then implement.
Excellent. And then same follow-up question. What do you feel are the top concerns facing small business owners in Mukilteo, and what do you propose to address those concerns?
Well, I am a small business owner myself, and so weathering through the pandemic, for my business, it was the school closures that were a big impact since we work with schools. So that's been really tough, and I have a lot of empathy for having to make payroll when you're facing not just a lot of cuts to your revenue lines and things like that. So I can relate to those challenges. What I've heard from businesses are concerns about the workforce and hiring, finding good candidates, kind of price gouging. So as that market, it gets tougher, your competitors' prices are dropping, and this makes it a lot more difficult. But that there are also opportunities. So building better community relationships, using virtual platforms to provide more flexibility for businesses. And of course, there have been a lot of business grants in the last year, and expect to have that with that American Rescue money in the next couple of years as well. So I think some of those have to be tackled on a regional level. So that's why I participate in a crazy amount of weekly communications and monthly meetings with other mayors and the county executive and council. Particularly on workforce, that's something that having programs that are at a regional level can help solve that challenge. And then again, I think just turning towards our Chamber of Commerce and strengthening those connections and just communication into the community.
Excellent. So. All right, so I'll ask Jennifer first this next question, then we'll pass it off to Joe. But this is about seniors in Mukilteo. So excluding changing housing and zoning codes, how would you make Mukilteo better for seniors?
Yeah, well, I have like a couple stats about seniors. I wanted to find those guys in my little stack here. There are about 3,400 folks that qualify as the definition for seniors in Mukilteo's community, and that's a really important part of what makes our community a vibrant place to live. And they can be really underserved. So we've made sure that Rose Hill Community Center is open for them, for the Seniors Association, for free, but it's not really a true home. So I think having a conversation about a potential senior center is one way to find a better way to serve our senior community. And then, of course, expanding our recreation programs here. I think Rose Hill is really a fundamental part of, and Parks and Recreation are a fundamental part of our quality of life in Mukilteo. And, there's a lot of research now about seniors that, once you're over 50, you're a senior. But not everybody that's over 50 wants to be like signing up to play bridge in the afternoon. Like they might think of themselves as more active still, or kind of what we might have thought about what a senior center means. So all of that adult programming that happens here, and then the good connections we have with other recreation providers in our city is just another way to help continue to serve our seniors. So I think looking at the senior center I mentioned is probably the prime issue that we will be looking at in the next couple of years as we get to all of the mechanics of what it would take to consider at least one possible site.
Excellent. And Joe, same question to you. Do you want me to repeat
Nope.
it?
No, I don't need. Thank you. Well, apparently I am a senior. Hadn't really thought about it until now, but I can tell you I've had a great deal of opportunity in working with seniors in the Medicare field for the 30 years that I've done that. And so I think I understand a lot of their interests and their concerns very well. The fact that we opened the community center under my administration, we got Rose Hill built, and we did, the room we're just sitting outside of here, the Christensen room, again, was designed specifically for the seniors. And They use that, although there are times it's either too small or somebody has rented it. And so they really want a place that they can do walk-ins, again, as they call their own, as the mayor was just saying. And I think that we can do that. There's property that we have, I think, that would make sense. Up in Japanese Gulch, alongside the community garden, there's a space there, that a building that was torn down that used to be the old police station. It's just going to be a matter of the money. I think working with the seniors organization and getting grants to get something like that built is what that's going to take, because it's just dollars. You're talking about probably a few $1 million to get a building built and a space for them, and that's what they need. And so yeah, I understand seniors, and I support them.
Excellent. Well, and so this next question, we'll start with Joe, but speaking of the Rose Hill Center and this view behind us here, you know, the Mukilteo waterfront is sort of the envy of Snohomish County. So in a perfect world, what would be a future vision, your future vision for Old Town?
Well, and when you say Old Town, I think many people think of the waterfront. I mean, that's certainly what we're known for, the lighthouse, the waterfront there. We are fortunate that we were able to get the state park transferred over to the city when I was a state representative. We got that done. And then under my administration, we renovated Lighthouse Park, and it's beautiful today. It's actually not done. We've only done about the first 1.5 phases of that park. There's still more that needs to be done there. And the property that's being transferred over from the tank farm transfer, again, that happened under my administration, we have more property that's there. That it is zoned for some commercial retail space, but also open space. So what I see happening is either more open space along the waterfront that people can access, or some more commercial. The interesting thing as you get into commercial needs is it creates a need for more parking. One of the biggest issues we have on the waterfront is a lack of parking. The problem also on the waterfront is all of the parking we do have is surface parking. So it creates this sprawl, which I think is not the best use of that waterfront. So I think we need to take another look at some sort of a parking structure where you can to really bring some of that together, and it allows you to open up more of that space. Under our code, every time you open up a commercial space, you have to provide so many parking spaces. Where do you put that? When the Silver Cloud was put in, they did a good job in working with us and putting their parking underneath of it, so it isn't just sprawled out outside of the building. So there's things that you can do along that line. And but we've done a lot on the waterfront under my administration, and it would certainly continue to beautify that waterfront.
I have a follow-up question on this one. You mentioned about a parking structure.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you like to say to those that are critics that say that would obstruct their view, or maybe take away from the aesthetics of having a parking structure at the waterfront?
Well, I mean, it certainly doesn't have to be. It can be designed to where you're not taking people's views out. One of the locations would be as you're coming across the bridge towards the lighthouse off to the left behind Diamond Knot, and that property back there that is owned by the city. That our original design was to have a parking structure there. Then you would also have an access point for walking directly up that bridge onto that structure with an elevator and stairs down to the park on that side. And it's hidden because the way the bluff goes behind the railroad. Even the parking structure across from Ivers, you're probably looking at maybe a two-story with parking on the top, so it shouldn't block the view of Arnie's and all that. But there's ways to check that height, see what it would do with views. We did that when we were looking at putting a pedestrian overpass down here. They literally took balloons up in the air to a certain height just to be able to look and see what impact that would have on people's views.
Excellent.
Well, it is an exciting time for our waterfront because we've seen so many changes just even in the last year or two. So with the new Mukilteo Ferry Terminal opening, the promenade that we dreamed of when we passed the waterfront redevelopment master plan during my term here as mayor, is a reality, at least to get you to the terminal and up over to the other side. So with that piece of the promenade, you can kind of see the vision of where we will be, the length of the waterfront. One of the things that I did when I first was elected was really prioritize getting access to that pathway on the tank farm. So ever since 2014, we've had that interim path open, and it's not perfect because it's sort of old concrete and some gravel, but at least folks have been able to get a feel for that nice loop that we'll have someday to walk from Lighthouse Park all the way down to Edgewater. So for me, the vision for the waterfront is really encapsulated in that master plan. That walkway, the promenade from end to end, and then new shops and restaurants. So there's, of course, when you head down to the waterfront now, we've got the new traffic signal that's really improved things. And it won't be long before the rest of that intersection at Front Street has changed over as well. So a couple new shops and restaurant, and then of course you could stack some parking behind that right up to the railroad track. The height limits there throughout the area are basically where the Silver Cloud is. So you can kind of get a feel for how tall the buildings might be if folks decide to use that to the top level there. So some new shops there. And then on the other side of Silver Cloud, as you walk down in the future to enjoy the rest of the waterfront, the NOAA building, of course, at the federal level, unfortunately we're not going to see the Marine Fisheries Science Center there again, but they're in the process of transferring it to the Port of Everett. So I'm excited about what I've heard from them, which is the possibility for maybe a small public aquarium, sort of another destination on the waterfront that ties back to the water and our access to Puget Sound. And then there's kind of two parcels that the city owns on the other side of NOAA. So one of them is slated for economic development, mixed use, maybe shops and restaurants on the ground floor. And that's something that the city could lease, or if the council decides we might sell the property, someone with a clear vision for it. And then another park that's more focused on active recreation. So access to the waterfront, maybe some place where you can rent kayaks and get out on the water. And so then the promenade that takes you to Japanese Gulch, that's going to harken back to the natural history of our water. And then finally, the property that's owned by Tulalip tribes, and they're governed by our zoning. So same thing you might see right at the corner of Front Street, mixed use development possibly. So shops and restaurants and all those kind of things that people are interested in pairing with their quiet walk along the beach. Sometimes it's cool to have places to visit as well.
And I'm going to have this follow-up question in less than 30 seconds, because both of you mentioned all this development at the waterfront. So with all that comes a lot of traffic. So right now, and sorry for my ignorance here, there's only one road really to get down here. So for those residents that live in Old Town, should they expect possibly in the future that there's going to have to be maybe some construction to widen some of the roads, maybe 5th Street? I don't know what streets, I'm just going to say possibly 5th Street.
5th Street we are studying right now, but not to widen it for cars. So we're looking at sidewalks and bike infrastructure and sort of what fits the neighborhood. So we think we've wrapped up our public comment on that, and we're getting ready to sort of report back through the process. So you might see 5th Street change, but it'll be really more for a pedestrian focus. And then, I've been involved in the city for longer than you might expect since I was a lot younger. And so, we've talked over the years about a different access route, but that issue was sort of put to bed 10 or 15 years ago. So we're always going to be using the speedway, and it's unlikely that some of those physical factors will really change.
Yeah, I would say pretty much along the same lines of that. I don't see any widening of the speedway or having a separate access road for that. Again, what the problem I think I see is even when people come down now, there's just many times not enough parking, especially on a nice sunny summer day. Putting in another restaurant down there will actually spread out those users, but I don't know that you'll see an appreciable traffic issue. We've got 4.5 million cars that take that every year just for the ferry. So yeah, I don't foresee widening that speedway. If anything, I would love to be able to get the holding lanes off of the speedway and literally shift the highway over and have a 10 to 12 foot wide walkway the entire length of that speedway for pedestrian and bicycling. That would be a great goal for the future.
Excellent. All right, so this next question, we're nearing the halfway point, but I'll ask it to Joe first, and then we'll go to Jennifer. So in 2015, Mukilteo's award-winning comprehensive plan shifted from managing growth to sustaining redevelopment because there is very little undeveloped land left in the city. What changes would you like to see in the city's comprehensive plan?
Well, the comprehensive plan is a document that we have to do based on the state. One of my major kind of pet peeves is that I believe in local control, and I think that the state, the county, and even organizations like Puget Sound Regional Council have too much say over what should be the decisions of the residents, the citizens, and their representatives, in this case the council and the mayor, to make those decisions as to how that city is going to look and how it's going to build out. If you allow the state to do it, it's basically what's going to differentiate one city from another? Are we all going to look like Lynnwood? Are we all going to then look like Seattle or Everett? Or can we have our own look and feel? And so continuing to push for the idea of having our own local say. We're at build out, 98%. There isn't really a whole lot of area left for redevelopment, and that was always one of my concerns with the HAB. The only way to get to that more density that they might be encouraging us to do would be to go in and start rezoning in existing neighborhoods and allowing developers to purchase a few lots together, tear those out, and then put in 12-plex, 18-plex, however many they can fit into that spot. And the city can either encourage that or discourage that. Obviously, I'm on the camp of discouraging.
Excellent. And then same question, what changes would you like to see in the city's comprehensive plan?
Well, you read my bio earlier, so you guys heard that I went back to school at the UW after serving on council for a little while to study city planning, because I think it's really important. And so I actually look at the comprehensive plan as a document that's really owned by our community. It might be a state law that says we have to adopt one, but nobody at the state says exactly what it has to say or what our vision is for the future. So I'm really proud of that comprehensive plan that we put together towards the beginning of my first term. It did win awards, that's true. And so for this new update that we're going to start working on next year and finalize in 2024, I think really just using data that we know about our community and understanding how our community has changed in that 10 years or so. We know that 1 in 5 households, if you look down your street, every 5th house, those folks speak a language other than English when they're at home with their family members. So making sure that we're reflecting that diversity. I'm proud that we founded our city's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. It's 7 really awesome individuals. So I'm excited to have their input and insights in how we reflect back everybody who lives in Mukilteo. And then also, of course, we did this in 2015, but ways to reach the community and get the voices of our youth involved in setting that vision for the future. So I think, so I would say probably not substantive changes, but things that better reflect, who lives and works in Mukilteo and who we are today.
Sarah Noet knows that buyers and sellers need to be agile in this fast-paced real estate market. That's why Sarah listens to her clients' needs and uses her extensive real estate knowledge to help them close a deal. Thinking of buying or selling? Then call Sarah Noet and her team at 425-516-1459 and get ready to move.
Excellent. So next question, we'll start with Jennifer and then we'll go to Joe. If there's ever a budget shortfall or a recession, what recommendations would you present on how to mitigate that shortfall?
We've written a lot of tough budgets over the last few years. It seems like every year there's a new challenge, there's a new gap to be made up to help to try to make an effort to balance our budget so that incoming revenues, we're spending those on that year's expected expenditures. I'm proud that we've always done that. So I haven't used the city's reserves to balance our budget over my time as mayor, and that's a change from when Joe was mayor before us. He spent down our reserves by about $3 million, and I've actually added to the reserves, and that's even in addition to the money that we got through the CARES grants, which did help us through last year's challenges. So that's in addition to that, even outside of those funds. So I've made tough choices all those years, and really sort of, you asked how I would do that. It's by looking at our core services. So public safety and making sure that the city is operating well. And then, cutting where it makes sense. So by tightening our belts, looking at our travel expenses, office expenses. I've cut the mayor's office budget by 10%. Just in flat dollars, not even with inflation since I began. So, looking to my office first and then focusing on the core priorities of our community.
Excellent. And Joe, same question.
Well, I guess we don't have to look at if there's a recession or a budget shortfall. I was mayor between 2006 and 13. We all know what happened in 2008. We had one of the longest recessions, at least in my lifetime. And so we did live through that. I'm very proud of the fact that we went through that. I have no idea what she's talking about, $3 million in reserves. The only time we dipped into our reserves at all was in an emergency when we had to fix some of the piping in Japanese Gulch, or Big Gulch, excuse me. And we did that specifically so that we could get it done, and then that was replaced. What we didn't do is raise taxes. During that recession, it's a tough time on the residents. The city went through some tough times as well. Our sales tax was down, but it didn't seem like the right time to be raising taxes for our citizens. So in the entire 8 years of mayor, your property taxes went up 6%. In 2019, during a great, not a recession, but a very good economy, this is prior to COVID, the mayor used 12% property tax. We went back, used not only the 1%, but 11% of the entire bank capacity. Every year you're allowed to raise taxes 1%. If you don't raise them, that gets banked. It gets set aside. So that was collected over 2 decades. In 1 year, that was the highest property tax increase in our history of our city. Was used not during a recession, but during a good time. And so for her to talk about that we were using up all the funding, when I left, we had 40% of our operating in reserves. So, yeah, I'm not sure where she's coming at, but you can certainly look at the numbers and see the tax increases.
Jennifer, would you like to respond?
Sure. So $3 million number that came from the 2013 budget document. So easy to check if you wanna look that up. And then just as a reminder, because sometimes the numbers sound big, but the impacts to residents are actually somewhat small, and they can make sense if you're getting the services that you want and deserve. So every 1% is about $5 a year for the average household. So like what I bought this coffee for, right? And that's the average house, right? So right now the average house is assessed by the county at $500,000. Your house is twice that. That means it's $10 a year. So just to put some context to the numbers, I know your property tax bills are big, but the city part of it is kind of small. And I stand by the choice that we made in 2019. The council wanted to make sure that we had a sustainable budget, and I proposed to them that this is a tool that we have to make sure that we're continuing to provide the services you want. We're not having to cut police, and we've been able to expand those public safety divisions of the city. So I guess that's my response.
Well, I guess what I would say to that is that it's so easy to say, oh, it's only you hear that all the time. It's only the cost of a latte. But that is one incremental portion. What she's referring to is just the increase, and that's at 1%. She ended up putting it 12% in 1 year. So instead of the city collecting an average of about $50,000 a year in property tax, in that 1 year, that base got set up another $500,000, over $500,000. That sets a whole new base for the next year's 1% is what you're writing on. So that $500,000 plus all that's already collected, which is around $5 million. So this idea that, it's only a little bit, this isn't the only tax. She's raised 300% on the stormwater fee. That didn't raise at all while I was mayor. As soon as she got in, over the years, it was $7.50 per month. Now it's over $25 a month for stormwater fees. So she's raising taxes all over the place, and this wasn't even during a recession. So you got to ask yourself what you want more of.
And I'll have last word.
I guess I would add a couple points. So I was on the council, so those budgets, I voted for them. And so when we banked those dollars over the years, we were saving residents about $1 million. It's true that compounds, and that's money we left on the table and we never collected from the residents. Because at the time, we were able to manage the budget and the services that we had. But when you just, sit on those bank taxes while other costs are rising, costs that are out of our control. So costs at the regional level, the cost of healthcare, those at some point you've got to keep the budget balanced, and so that's the choice that the council made. And then I might just add about surface water. It was actually a funny topic of conversation in 2012 when I ran against Joe for mayor. And folks were really worried. I don't know, a lot of people might not remember, but the Sounder train is getting canceled all the time because of those landslides. And so the idea of how we handle our water when it rains and it heads into our pipes, and we've got a lot of steep hillsides, it was really important for those reasons, and then also because of federal law that we improve our surface water program. And that meant that we had to fully fund the services that were required by federal law. It's the Clean Water Act. So we did finally, after 10 years of staying at $7 a month, we did a gradual increase. And so, $7 a month, 300% sounds like 300% sounds huge, but at the end of the day, it is a smaller amount. I just want to make sure that that's clear. So.
Yeah, so we do have to move on to a different topic. This question does have a bit of context, so if you need me to repeat myself or reread anything, just let me know. I'll ask Joe this first, and then we'll move on to Jennifer. So earlier this year, the Washington State Legislature passed a series of police reform laws regarding use of force. Overwhelmingly, law enforcement officers throughout the state argue that these new laws inhibit them from catching criminals and keeping communities and themselves safe. Would you support a resolution requesting the governor, the Washington State Legislature, and the Attorney General to assist in providing clarification of these new law enforcement standards and requirements?
Absolutely, I would. I know it's concerning to me and many residents of what's happening. Not only all of the criminals who were basically let out of prison due to COVID, let out of prison early, but the fact that now it's not even, I wouldn't even call it a catch and release. Now they don't even bother trying to catch the criminals because they know there's nothing they can do with them. And then you couple that with what happened with our state Supreme Court that says that basically legalizing smaller amounts of drugs, it has caused the criminals to be basically openly scoffing at the law, and that's going to be a concern. So I think what we've seen is that pendulum swinging, and the citizens are getting upset, and it's going to swing back the other way. It has to, because we've just continued. I know even in our community, we're seeing more of a rash of car prowls, car break-ins, and the citizens are getting concerned. So I would have no problem in signing a letter.
Excellent. And then Jennifer, the same question to you.
Sure, yeah. Well, I've actually already done that. So I've talked about the partnership I have with other mayors and the county. We've already reached out to ask for that type of clarification because I think the legislature had good intentions. When you think about the mental health challenges that are a big part of our contacts with folks by our police officers aren't trained social workers, they're not mental health professionals, and so it does make sense that someone else might be the one to have that first conversation. But unfortunately, there are a lot of unintended consequences, and I don't know if the folks in the state legislature even understood what those were, if they're just a little too far away from the day-to-day idea of operating a police department, but it certainly has tied our hands and has been a real challenge. So I definitely want to look to the legislature to ask them either to make changes or to really clarify their intent so that there are, and probably most importantly, to provide us funding. So these unfunded mandates, if they can provide us the funding, then we can push to do these things. So I started a social worker program. We just have it part-time. If we could have that full-time, that would really help our officers make good, productive communications and contacts with folks who are unsheltered or facing challenges in the community, and refocus their work, which we've done already. Of course, we've already got one traffic officer that takes care of speeding in the city, and we're working on another one. But yeah, looking for funding from the legislature and clarification, I think we really need that.
Now, you mentioned you've already reached out. What's the status? Can you share with everyone the status?
In partnership with the city of Everett, so that's how we kind of delivered that message. And I know that the Everett mayor and police chief have met with some folks from the Attorney General's office and really pushed to ask for clarification. But of course, the way the law was written, the Attorney General doesn't have to give us any interpretations of the law for like another 6 months, which is not helpful because we had to implement it right away after it was passed. So as far as I know, they're still on that timeline.
Excellent. Well, kind of going down the same vein as that, regarding public safety, what do you think the city is doing right, and where might there be opportunity for improvement?
Great. Well, some things that we've done since I started as mayor. So we have a victims coordinator now. That was a priority I talked about in that first year when I was elected. And it was something that was seen as kind of not a problem in Mukilteo, but it's not true. We actually make more arrests for domestic violence than for DUI in our city. So we started as a domestic violence victims coordinator and expanded that for all victims of crime. So I'm proud of that service that we provide to citizens in their most vulnerable moments. We've got our traffic officer, and we are advertising for another one, so we'll have another traffic cop to be out on the street and really focused on the speeding issues that we hear so often about, one of the top 3 complaints of members in our community, so we're trying to be responsive to that. And then, you know, as we talked about, folks who are unsheltered, encampments, things like that, luckily our problem is really manageable right now. The challenge of homelessness and those issues, it's not like what you see in Seattle, and we're not on a track for that to happen. So I'm proud of, in fact, actually today our public works crew is cleaning up an encampment. Folks in the community probably don't know about it because in Mukilteo we've got a lot of gulches and forested areas, and that's where these people are choosing to set up their things. And so we follow a good process, and we stay on top of them. So I think we're doing all those things right. And then, like I said, more funding, right? So we're going to use some of the funding we have to implement a body cam program for our officers. I think that's important for everybody involved in those challenging situations, both for our cops and the public. And then, and I think we've expanded a detectives program, and I think in time expanding those things are important.
Excellent.
Well, what I think the city's doing right is we are fortunate that our police officers that we have are probably some of the most compassionate and dedicated public service. Any interaction, and I think you'll certainly hear this from the citizens, the interaction they have with their officers is never a concern. The concern is really, again, about the traffic. Unfortunately, while I was mayor, we had 2 motorcycles that were being used for traffic and dedicated officers for that. Today, the motorcycles sit empty. We don't even have officers trained to be on the motorcycle. So it's a difference of priority. And folks, you can listen to politicians talk about what they're going to do. You don't need to do that this year. You've got 2 mayors that were here for 8 years. Don't listen to what they say. Look at what they've done. And if it was a priority for traffic, it would be happening now. It clearly wasn't. It would be undermined. That is an area of major concern. And I also believe that, and quite frankly, had talked about under my administration to do body cams as well. At the time, it was the police union that was basically against them. And now I think it's changed, the whole discussion around body cams. I've supported them then, I support them now. I think it's the right way to go. And I believe that will be implemented.
Excellent.
Where do you guys stand, or what's your stance on defunding the police? I would start with you, Jennifer, and then Joe.
My budget doesn't defund the police, and I think it's a complicated issue. It means different things to different people, but I really support our police department. I'm really proud of our chief and all of our officers. And so making sure that they have the right tools and training and providing the dollars for that, that's been my priority, and that'll continue to be my priority. And then I just want to add, just because it's sort of like I said one thing and Joe said the opposite, we have a traffic officer today. Probably means that Joe drives a speed limit because he might not have met Officer Gonzalez. He issues more tickets than almost all of our other officers combined. So watch out, follow the speed limit. He will be on your tail if you don't. And then, we just need to hire the next one and find the right candidate for that. I'm hoping to get actually a motorcycle officer for that one, someone who's trained in that. But
yeah. All right. Well, I find that interesting. I'm on the Public Safety Committee and talking to the chief, and we were talking about putting another officer. And my question to him does that mean we'll have finally a dedicated patrol officer? And he says, well, no, not really. It just means that in between calls they'll be able to do more traffic if they have the time. So, but. That aside, let me get to your question, which was defunding the police. I don't understand how that means different things to different people. I mean, it's pretty clear, defunding and police. I do not support defunding the police. If we look at what is our top priority as public officials, as representatives of the people, is public safety. That's first and foremost. People want to feel comfortable in their homes and in their community when they're out walking or biking or driving through their community. And so, no, I would certainly not be supportive of defunding them at all. And I would be supportive of, probably we may have to add more dollars, again, to make sure we have dedicated traffic.
Excellent. All right. So we'll start with Jennifer with this next one. So Mukilteo is obviously a beautiful city. It's home to Japanese Gulch, wetlands, and parks. What would you propose to improve the city's green spaces?
Well, I think to improve our green space is really just implementing our vision that we've established. So we've got the money to design the daylighting, the opening up of Japanese Gulch Creek on the waterfront. And so one of our challenges will be pursuing the construction funding for that once we have that design ready to go. That'll be a really beautiful opportunity there's already salmon that swim up Japanese Gulch, but they're just going through a pipe underneath the tank farm, underneath all that cement. So we'll be able to, with this plan, once we've got the funding, open that up to the air and to the community too. So you'll be able to walk right by and see that stream in the way that it was in its natural habitat. We have just finishing up our capital improvement plan, a 6-year plan to look at a lot of things. And there's some great projects in there that we've got slated for the next 6 years or so. And one to highlight, because we actually don't talk about it that much, Harbor Point Village Park. So it's a little park that's kind of near the village center. If you go to Tairama or the Bellaterra apartment, it's just right around the corner. So we've got a playground in the plan that's been in the plan for a very long time, but now we're finally looking at an implementation date. And then we've talked a little bit also about maybe having sort of a dog park at the south end. It's a big space, and actually folks use it right now to play throw ball for their dog. So maybe making that an established place, and it'll be a neighborhood park because there's not a lot of parking there. But there's so many people I see every day walking the boulevard, and so they'll be able to walk down to that park and have a few more amenities. So yeah, I think it's a matter of prioritizing and then having a vision.
Great. And then Joe?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and again, we don't have to listen to what somebody says they may do. We can look at what they've done. Under my administration, we were able to get the money and go through to preserve Japanese Gulch in working with the trust that owned it at the time. I'm a little surprised. That literally happened in the last month that I was mayor, that was signed, and that we were able to push that through, the same as the transfer of the tank farm property. It's still in the city of Everett. That should have been annexed into Mukilteo. It's our parkland. You can pretty much only get to it from Mukilteo, and it should be in Mukilteo. So I'll work to get that annexed into our city where it should be. But obviously, we are fortunate to have 9 gulches spanning throughout the city of Mukilteo. In Big Gulch, under my administration, we had put in the trail system for that, and we actually worked with a company to extend it all the way down to the Sound. And so, yeah, absolutely, I am for open space. As far as the Mukilteo Park at the south end, the Harbor Point area, again, it was my idea during the council to say, why don't we take a portion of that and have it as a dog park? We've got one down here at the north end of town. You see people walking their dogs all over town. They love the off-leash parks, but most people don't want to drive their car all the way down to this one. So I'm very supportive of making a portion of that for a dog park as well.
Excellent. All right, so we've reached our last question. Just to give us a quick 30-second answer if you can. There's been a lot of talk about equity, a lot of discussion around that topic, but what does equity mean to you?
Equity to me is way different in terms of equality. I'm a big proponent of equality. People should have the same opportunities. That's what America's about, right? The equality. It doesn't mean they come with all of the same. If I'm going to go play basketball with a group, I have the same opportunity. I don't have the same skills, right? I'm not going to do as well as maybe somebody else, but that's equality to me. You're in a classroom. When you're teaching, it's the same classroom. It's the same teaching. It's the same test. Equity to me seems to be more about outcomes, and that's a lot harder to control. Do we just give everybody in the class a B because we want that equity? But I'm more into equality, which means give them the same opportunity. America's a place of opportunity, and I don't know that government's the place to say, I think the message to send to people that says, you can't do it without government's help. I don't think that helps them in the long run. So that's my concern on the equity. Is it about outcomes, and how do we get there? Are we talking about so?
Jennifer?
Equity isn't about outcomes. It's about making sure that everybody has the same starting line.
That's equality.
So the same starting line. Thanks, Joe. I think we look at it differently, though. I think it's important to clarify.
Well, that's why we asked the question, because a lot of people have different understandings of it. So no problem.
So we just formed our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. So it's an issue that's important to me, and I'm glad that we've got some folks that are really focused on those issues at the city. Same starting line means when we're not in charge of schools, but the school example is a good one. So when you walk into the classroom, everybody has equal opportunity: the books, the desks, the warm room, hopefully. But not everybody is coming in at the same starting line. So how did they sleep last night? Did they get breakfast or dinner? Are their parents both able to help them with their homework the night before? Those are things that impact not having kind of the same starting place and you can have the same opportunities, but if you're not coming to the table with the same, I guess, I'll just use the starting place thing again. That's sort of the challenge of equity and why it matters to focus on it. So I mentioned how many folks in Mukilteo have diverse backgrounds, speak other languages at home. They, might approach the city website or call our number and really look at that access to city government differently. So yeah, they can all call. I mean, they get a letter from the city, they can all open it, but maybe they can't read it, or maybe they can't read it as comfortably as somebody else. So making sure that we're tackling those issues and serving our whole community, I think that's really important. And I think to me that's the difference between equity and equality.
First thing that comes to your mind when I have this quick question: how do you hold each other accountable?
Like, how do I hold Joe accountable, or
how
other
do you hold
people?
yourself accountable to the residents that you represent? I'm sorry.
How do we hold each other accountable? I don't know. Well, for me, it's communications, I think, is for the first thing that comes to mind. So I've always tried to be really transparent and communicate frequently. And there's quite a few people on my email list, and those that know that I was sending out daily emails during the pandemic, and now we're on a weekly schedule. But that's something that's unique and hasn't been done before in the city, and I think that's sort of how I would. That's probably the first thing I would look to, is just making sure that folks know what we're up to, and then giving them really an open channel to let me know if they've got concerns, and people do. Whenever I send that email out, I always get a handful of emails right back again with just an assortment of topics. So that yeah.
I would say holding myself accountable, it's a mindset. It's when I first was mayor and I got into the office, for me it was more about than having a plaque. It was being able to answer the question when people ask, was the city better when you left it than when you started? What did you accomplish with the time you were given? And so that goes back to what I was saying, that we have a choice, 8 years for each of us. You can certainly take a look at the accomplishments and decide from there. But that's how you hold people accountable. Again, not by what they say, because what you say or what you do speak so loudly that what you say I can't hear. So look at what they've done in the past, not so much the promises, and that's accountability.
Coverage is important. Call Mike Dixon to find out what coverage is best for you. And pretty soon, you'll be Stixin' with Dixon. That's Mike Dixon with Farmers Insurance in Old Town Mukilteo. Call 425-375-0860 today, because coverage counts.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with Lynnwood Times today. Thank you for your responses. We do want to give both of you an opportunity to give a closing statement. So we'll start with Joe and we'll end with Jennifer. Thank you.
All right. Well, staying on that theme of looking at what we've done, we were able to, we're in this beautiful Rose Hill Community Center. We're actually right outside of it. It was very controversial of whether we're going to keep the old building and renovate it or buy a new one. Or build a new one. And so this council was having trouble with that. We sent it out to the voters, let them decide. They voted for new, we moved forward. That's how we got that done. The city hall, we built that. We'd been renting for over 14 years of space, and the city just can't do that, right? So we ended up, for me, it was important to get that city hall built, not only for our staff to have a better place to work, but for the citizens as well. Preserving that Japanese Gulch, being rated a AAA bond rating from the moment I got in, and the auditors saying we have to walk away, your books are so messed up, to hiring in a finance director that fixed that, got us a AAA bond rating. The fact that we were ranked twice by Money Magazine as one of the best places to live. getting the Lighthouse Park renovated, getting the transfer of the tank farm property. That's what I was about. I think my record speaks for itself. I kept your taxes low, 6% over 8 years. I didn't raise your stormwater fees. So I would say, take a look and do the comparison. You've got a choice, Mukilteo. If you'd like me to go back and work hard for you again, I'm ready.
All right. Well, thanks for watching if you guys made it this far. I think, I return again to having a good vision for the future. You can look back at what I did, but you're not voting for me because of what I've already done, but what I'm going to do. And so I want to continue to deliver on the vision that we have for our community of safe, strong neighborhoods, a city that's well run and efficient. And of course, I'm proud of my accomplishments too. So we finally got the funding after decades for the Harbor Reach corridor. We connected neighborhoods. We gave folks new safe places to walk and bike. And not just on Harbor Reach, but you're seeing sidewalks on 76 come to life for the first time. There's new sidewalks on Harbor Point Boulevard and improvements on 84th Street. And a lot of those came about because we established a plan. We wrote and adopted our bike transit walk plan, and we're delivering on the vision that was set in there. Before that plan, how did you get a new sidewalk? You emailed somebody at the city and you got put on a list. It wasn't strategic. There wasn't a good timeline. We didn't have the full scope of the picture. And so, planning ahead and being smart about the future, that's the way to deliver on a vision and deliver on those promises. A couple other things I haven't mentioned. We talked a little bit about businesses. We did reform our business license program during my time as mayor, and I'm proud that we were able to, encourage job creation by sort of giving a discount for the first few employees. And so I think that was something that we did a few years ago that I'm proud of. And then, again, my accomplishments around public safety. The school resource officer that we have now based at Kamiak, the victims coordinator, expanding our community policing programs. We launched our youth police academy that's connecting kids to our to the police officers, and also policing as a profession is really important. So those are just a few highlights. I would ask for the voters to give me the chance to continue to deliver on the vision and offer some steady leadership as we move towards recovery from the pandemic.